Hello everyone! Welcome to another day of drawing. Wonderful that you all show up. You motivate me just as much as I motivate you. So I was thinking for warm-up today. Oh, Pokey, welcome back. Wonderful. Been missing your drawings. I see we have a few new names here as well. Welcome, Visor and Pain. Nice to have you joining. Alright. So today I was thinking we'd start out with 7 minutes of square circles, and then 7 minutes of funnels as warm-up. Then we'll hop into the next part, which is boxes. So here we go, 7 minutes of ghosted square circles. Welcome, sons. Remember to keep your wrist off the table. Relax your shoulder. And draw all the way from your shoulder. Focus more on the movement of the arm than precision. If your lines are curving in one direction, try to arc them in the opposite. Remember to be conscious about your lines. We're not just turning off our brain here. Take your time and enjoy. There's no rush here. Remember to rotate the paper so you get the most comfortable angle. Pokey asked about how many times you should do the same circle. According to Comfy, only twice. That's why when we're doing the funnels one, we're just doing so many circles. So I believe this one is more for making the boxes. The circles isn't really the focus of this exercise. And then, as we do the funnels, we'll be focusing on making circles instead. So, that was 7 minutes of square circles. We will hop over to 7 minutes of funnels now. Remember that the center one has the smallest width, and then the width grows as it comes out towards the end. Remember not to slant your ovals. Welcome, Snoogans. Yes, we got another 3 minutes of funnels before we hop into today's lesson. Hey, Hanta, welcome. Remember to keep that wrist off the table. Alright, that's enough warm-up for today. I can feel myself that I'm improving pretty quickly with these exercises. It's pretty amazing, honestly, how something so simple can have such amazing effects on your lines. Alright, we're getting ready for the fun part. All your hard work will pay off. Now we get to play with perspective. Now that you can draw a straight line, a box, even a circle, you can start thinking in 3 dimensions finally.
All right, it's time. We're going to talk about boxes. You can tell that I'm excited. I'm also kind of daunted about explaining this because it is an inherently difficult thing to comprehend. And I want to warn you right off the bat, it's going to be a lot to take in, and there's no reason to expect it all to sink in at once. You may want to watch this video a few times over a period of time. You will definitely want to read through the lesson material, which again will be linked in the description. But all in all, don't stress if you don't understand it immediately. A lot of these lessons go hand in hand with the exercises that are assigned, and you don't have to understand exactly what you're doing before you start the exercises. The exercises have fairly clear instructions, at least the earlier ones do. and they will kind of, as long as you follow those instructions, you will start to see how these things are being applied, and your understanding will improve over time. So to start with, we are going to look at the concept of a vanishing point. And if you've encountered perspective before or have tried to learn this stuff in the past, you may fully understand what a vanishing point is, but I'm going to get into it anyway, just in case there's someone who's completely new to this. So this is one of the images from the actual lesson material, the written stuff, and it shows here that a vanishing point is essentially when you have lines that are parallel in 3D space. So think of a table that you have next to you or whatever. It's made up of a bunch of parallel edges. Those lines, once drawn and projected into 2 dimensions, meaning the piece of paper you're drawing on or your canvas or whatever, those lines are no longer going to be drawn as though they are parallel. And so when I say things like in 3D space or in 2D space or when projected into 2D, that's important, because if I talk about lines that are parallel in 3D space, that means in the hypothetical 3D world that we are drawing. When I'm talking about in 2D space, that means the piece of paper that we're drawing on. Now, as you can see here, all of these lines are parallel. These ones here, all of these lines are parallel to one another. And as they go off into the distance, they converge towards a single point far off in the distance. And the reason this happens is because of the simple rule of perspective that you probably already know, that objects that move farther and farther away from you will get smaller and smaller. Eventually, that object is going to get so small that it collapses to a single point. Now, if you take that principle and you apply it to, say, the distance between 2 lines, or the length of a line, then as that line moves farther and farther away from you, the length of this line, when drawn in 2 dimensions, will get smaller and smaller until it too collapses to a point. Now, the reason that I'm saying a line, or the distance between 2 points, is that when you have 2 lines that are parallel to one another, they have a very consistent distance between them. That's the nature of being parallel. So if you've got 2 parallel lines like this, the distance here is always going to stay the same if they are parallel. And once you draw them in 2 dimensions, this distance, as you get farther and farther, let's say the viewer is over here, that's you, and as it gets farther and farther away from you, this distance gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it comes to a single point, it collapses. And so therefore, these lines, these parallel lines, also converge towards that single point. No matter how many parallel lines you have, they are always going to converge. As long as they're parallel to each other, they will converge towards the same point. So that's what we're seeing here. You've got these planes, which I've said are 1 meter wide based on this diagram. And this 1 meter gets smaller and smaller and smaller. It's still 1 meter because it's just far away. It's not actually smaller in 3D space. It's smaller when we draw it as it gets further away. And eventually this 1 meter collapses to this point. And the lines that we've got running alongside of each of these planes are all parallel to one another, because these 2 lines are consistently 1 meter apart. And so are these 2 lines. And then these lines here and here are whatever height this plane is apart from each other. And you can add as many lines as you want, and they're all going to be different distances from each other, but those distances will be consistent. And they are all parallel, and therefore they are all going to converge towards this single point. And that is what a vanishing point is. Now, we can apply this principle to talk about boxes. I like boxes. Boxes are great. Boxes are great because they summarize the very core of what three-dimensional space is, because a box has 3 dimensions to it. It has no more than that. It's a very simple form. It doesn't have to be a cube. Keep that in mind. When I talk about boxes, I'm not necessarily saying anything about cubes. They are not necessarily as long as they are wide, as they are deep. They are just rectilinear forms, unless I state otherwise, which will come into play in a later exercise. But they are essentially just a summary of 3D space. So let's look into what I mean by that. Here, I have a box that I've drawn. A box has 3 different sets of parallel lines, one for each dimension of space. And so, as we explored before, each set of parallel lines is going to have its own point at which those lines collapse. And so it has 3 vanishing points. So here, you can see I've extended the lines off into the distance. The red ones are all parallel to each other. The blue ones are all parallel to each other. And the green ones are all parallel to each other. And as you can see here, I have actually drawn the far side of this box. So normally you wouldn't be able to see this edge here, or this one. I'll just highlight them actually. Here. So you wouldn't normally be able to see this line or this line or this line because the front faces of the box would be blocking it. But I will often ask you to draw through your boxes, which is what that means, because it helps us to understand how this box actually sits as a 3-dimensional object in the 3D space we're working within. If you just draw the size that you can see, you're really only going to think about it in terms of how it is a collection of lines on your piece of paper. And so, going back to what I was saying, you have 3 distinct vanishing points for 3 sets of parallel lines. And if you need to think about that, pause this video and just find a box, find anything that is boxy, and look at the edges that it has. It's going to have 12 different edges, and these edges will be organized into 3 separate groups of edges that are parallel to each other. Once you've got that down, we can look at the idea of, well, there's one thing that always confused me immensely when I was younger and I was trying to learn perspective. What you may have heard about is 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, and 3-point perspective. This describes, people often use it to describe an entire scene, and that's not correct. As you can see here, this box that I've drawn has 3 vanishing points, so that's quote-unquote 3-point perspective. But as I will show in a moment, the whole scene is not limited to only 3 vanishing points. It is this box alone, that has just 3 vanishing points. So as you can see here, if I were to duplicate this box, so I took the box that I had, and I created a new box. I did not rotate it at all. It's all still parallel in the same way. So its sets of parallel lines are still going to be using the exact same vanishing points. So between these 2 boxes, we still only have 3 vanishing points. It's just in a different position. And so this one's lines are all going back towards, the same vanishing points. Now, what happens is, if I were to rotate this second box, if I were to change its orientation in space, its edges, or at least some of its edges, would no longer be parallel to those of the original box, this one being the original. And so let's do that. Here, I've rotated this box just a little bit. And when that happens, I rotate it on the kind of y-axis, so like the height. So if you were to imagine that there was a a metal rod stuck in the middle of this box. Just like this. And I spun the box a little bit along this axis. What I did was I took two sets of the parallel lines, these and these, and those edges are no longer parallel to their counterparts in this box because the box has been rotated. It's been turned in space. But its vertical lines are still parallel to those on this box. Let's erase all this, get rid of the clutter. So these lines here are still parallel because it's basically, these boxes are essentially parallel to my ground. And so I have not rotated them so that these verticals would be any different. So they still share the same vanishing point. The horizontal lines, however, as you can see here, I've added two new vanishing points, 4 and 5. So we had 1, 2, 3, and now we've got 4 and 5. You can also see that the distance that both vanishing points have actually moved is the same. So this distance here and this distance here, they're identical, which means for each box's horizontal lines, the distance between the vanishing points are the same. So the distance between these two and the distance between these two are the same. The vanishing points have simply slided. I've slid them along an axis. They went this way. And as a result, this box is slightly rotated. This one is slightly rotated relative to this one. Now that's a lot to take in. What I want you to understand from this is that a scene can have all kinds of objects that are not aligned to each other. You can have an infinite number of sets of parallel lines, and therefore an infinite number of vanishing points. You are not going to have a single scene that is dominated by just 3 vanishing points. In fact, if you were to construct a world that was so perfectly aligned to this grid, that would look so unnatural to a person that it would feel stiff and sterile. You need to have some objects. If you're drawing a room or whatever, it's never going to be so perfectly aligned, and that's actually going to look weird. It is, however, valuable still to actually set up an entire scene with 3 major vanishing points and to use that to create a grid that you can use as reference. Because if you have, now I'm going to throw this together really quickly so it's going to look pretty rough. Let's say we've got this scene here. I'm framing it out. And we've got and a vanishing point here, and another one way up here. We're going to create a bit of a grid. And actually, 3-point perspective grid is still actually kind of useful, because now if I wanted to draw something that was not aligned to it, I could still use those lines as some sort of a reference. So this box does not actually align to any of the vanishing points that are present, but having those lines and that grid there, as long as I'm not feeling any pressure to adhere so closely to it, I can still use it as a sort of reference point while I'm constructing these things. So it is valuable in that sense. I just don't want you to make the mistake that I did when I was learning, to think that an entire scene had to be perfectly aligned to this grid, otherwise it would be incorrect, which simply isn't true. So now that kind of explains, at least to an extent, the concept of 3-point perspective. But then how do we start running into 2-point perspective and 1-point perspective? Those are things that you might come across. And I feel like it's important to explain how we can get from 3-point to 2-point and to 1-point, even though we are drawing boxes which still inherently have 3 sets of parallel lines. So if they have 3 sets of parallel lines, where are these extra vanishing points disappearing to? So what we need to talk about to make sense of that is the fact that these vanishing points in 2- and 1-point perspective, they don't disappear. They still exist. It's kind of wrong to refer to these things as 2-point or 1-point perspective because there are still 3 vanishing points. There has to be because there are still 3 sets of parallel lines. What happens is that, as you saw when I was rotating that box, the one from here, let's just bring this up. Get rid of this clutter. So when I did this rotation here, the vanishing point slid along the horizon line, right? Let's toggle between that again, that you can see them sliding. As the vanishing point slides along the horizon or the axis, out of the frame that you're drawing inside of, and it continues to go, the convergences of your lines. So here, this is normal, we're used to this. It's a single vanishing point and all these lines are parallel and converging towards it. This vanishing point has now slid off in that direction. So here, maybe it's somewhere, it's probably about here now for this frame, so it's way out of frame, and you've still got a fair bit of convergence in these lines that you can see. But if you move that line, that vanishing point so far off frame, if you slide it along the axis or horizon so far away, eventually the actual convergence is going to become so minimal that it's barely worth even considering. So these lines are basically parallel to one another because this line has slid so far away that we refer to it as the vanishing point going to infinity. It's infinitely off the frame. This is essentially what happens to the vanishing points when we're talking about 2- and 1-point perspective. The vanishing points still exist. They've just been moved so far out of the frame that the convergence to those vanishing points no longer is really visible. So the lines essentially start behaving as being parallel to one another again, even though we're talking about in 2D space. And so let's look at it here. This is 2-point perspective, where our vertical vanishing point, the one that would have been, maybe here with lines converging like that, has moved so far off that the vertical lines are now effectively parallel to one another. It could have actually also been down here. Like, at one point it may have been converging this way and then it slid and was moved all the way off the frame until the convergence was essentially eradicated. So here, as I say in these notes, again, this is all on the written content, all these diagrams, the vertical vanishing point goes to infinity, resulting in 2-point perspective. That third vanishing point still exists, it's just no longer worth talking about. All of our vertical lines are now running perfectly parallel to one another, and they are running perpendicular to this horizon line, or the axis of the scene. See, they run perpendicular. And so any vertical line that you need to draw that is aligned to the same set is going to be running perfectly up and down, perpendicular to the horizon. Now, what if we were to take another one of these vanishing points and slide them to infinity? And because these two are very closely tied to each other, these two vanishing points, this one and this one, are going to slide together. So one of them is going to end up, as they say, move in this direction. One of them is going to end up somewhat central, and the other one is going to end up way off the page. So let's see what happens when we do that. So one of the vanishing points, actually I slid them in the other direction. If you want to keep the color coding accurate, they slid in this direction. So vanishing point 1 went way off the page, and vanishing point 2, the red lines, ended up being more central. And so now our blue lines are all running parallel to the horizon. They remain completely parallel to one another. Our vertical lines, the green ones, are running perpendicular to the horizon and parallel to one another. And all that's left is this last vanishing point where these depth lines, the lines that define the depth of each of these boxes, are still converging towards the singular vanishing point that still has any convergence left. So out of this, what you want to take away is the idea that in 3 and 2 and 1 point perspective, there are still 3 vanishing points because there have to be. A box consists of 3 sets of parallel lines, and for each set, there needs to be a vanishing point. And so we're not talking about these vanishing points just no longer existing. They still exist. Infinity is still a concept that has relevance. It still exists. It's just no longer going to have any real convergence. It's not a physical location that you can find in space. If you drew your canvas large enough, you would not be able to find those vanishing points on it because it's infinitely far away. Now, there is a simpler little rule of thumb that you can use when you're drawing any box to decide what kind of vanishing point system, 3 or 1 or 2 vanishing points, should I apply to this box? Now remember, they are applied to the boxes because the boxes themselves have those 3 sets of parallel lines. You might have one box drawn in 2-point perspective and another drawn in 3-point perspective within the same scene. Understanding which one we want to use requires us to think about how we, as the viewer, that is the viewer who sees what we are drawing. No, that's not described correctly. If you picture the here's my mirror on here. Every single thing that you draw is seen from some hypothetical viewer's point of view. They're looking at whatever objects you have drawn I'm just roughing this out. They're looking at them, and what you're actually drawing is how they see it. So this would be your drawing, and they would be seeing all of this happening. Now, this viewing angle here, the angle at which they view every object, that's important. That's what we use to determine what kind of perspective system or where the vanishing points are going to be for a given object. We think about that viewing angle as well as the orientation of the given object. Now, if your view, the viewing angle, is aligned mostly to a box's face, meaning you know how a box has 6 faces. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you're looking directly at one of these faces, or if that's generally the direction that you are looking at for this box, or you being the viewer, the hypothetical viewer, then you are going to use 1-point perspective for that box. Now let's use an example. Here's our frame. We've got a box. We are mostly looking at Sorry, I'm kind of trying to cut down on the time for this video, so I'm rushing these things. We are mostly looking at this face here. So we are going to end up with one vanishing point that is very much dead center, like all these lines are coming towards it. And all the other vanishing points are either going to have minimal convergence or they're going to have no convergence at all. So you can see with these, like they might be converging slightly, but this vanishing point is way off the screen. And these may not be converging at all because the vanishing point is at infinity. So if you're looking mostly at this face, this plane of the box, you're looking at the plane, you're looking at a plane of the box, and therefore think more one-point perspective. Maybe some of the vanishing points are not completely at infinity, maybe there's a little bit of convergence there, but it's not very much. Now, if you're looking at the edge of a box, meaning the edge is more oriented towards you, you're going to have a lot more convergence on either side of it. So you can see how this box is converging in this direction, and here, and here. So here your convergence isn't that much. It's they're either parallel or they're very minimal convergence. What we're really focusing on here is this edge, this one here. And it works the same for if we were talking about one of the horizontal edges. So maybe we're talking about this. It's the same thing. So here we're looking at this edge, so we have a lot of convergence coming this way. And this way, with these being fairly parallel. Lastly, if we're focusing in on the corner of a box, so now we have convergence, at least some sort of significant convergence on all three axes. And that's where we start thinking about three-point perspective for this box. So those are the simplest terms that you can put it in. It's not a strong rule, but it's kind of like a suggestion as to how you should be thinking about it. If you're looking at a face, or rather focusing in on the face, then we're talking about 1 point perspective. Edge is 2 point perspective. And corner is 3 point perspective. So you can use that kind of rule of thumb to figure out, okay, which kinds of convergences do I really need to care about when I'm drawing this box? If the edge is facing me, I only really need to worry about the two vanishing points. The third is going to be very minimal convergence or none at all. So I hope that helped. Again, this video is by no means going to clarify everything for you in an instant. It was a lot to convey and a lot to understand, and frankly, my explanations are not the best on video. So go through the written content, work through the exercises, even if you still feel you don't get it, and gradually it'll start to make sense. Also, it is important to keep in mind that some of the homework that I've assigned, specifically the rotated boxes and organic perspective boxes exercises, they are actually meant to push you to think about spatial problems that you may not have otherwise considered. It's not about testing you or getting you to get it right. A lot of people try this rotated boxes way too many times before feeling like they're done with the lesson. Try them only as much as they are the recommended page counts are. So 1 page of rotated boxes and 2 filled pages of organic perspective. It's not about you getting it right now. It's just these kinds of difficult spatial challenges that will get you thinking about different ways you can manipulate these freely rotated boxes. If you have any trouble with them, and you probably will, I recommend that after completing lesson 1, you move on to the 250 box exercise, where there are more techniques and more videos to help you in both figuring your way around these freely rotated boxes and also being able to check for mistakes and learn from them. So that's all I'm going to say for boxes. It's already been over 30 minutes, so hopefully that helped. And if it didn't, go through the lesson anyway, finish the homework, and it should gradually start to make more sense for you.
Whew. My brain sure is tired. Well, that was our daily 30 minutes of studying. As the 50-50 rule dictates, we must now free draw for 30 minutes. And then tomorrow we will be so we'll get a little bit of time between today and tomorrow to digest this video. And then tomorrow we'll go over it again in the text form and hopefully get into the plotted perspective exercise as well. So if you were sleepy, Guante, you know what? Your prompt today, if you want one, is sleepy. There you go. Pour your emotions into your drawing. So I will set a timer for 30 minutes. We'll do some free draw. couple minutes to finish up and then uploading. Okie dokie. We got a few drawings today. Got Fizzy with the... Ooh, that's really nice. Really good shading work as well on the ground. Very consistent. It's good to... Well, that's really good. I got to do a little bit of a sea monster attacking the ship here. Some eyes. And this guy who got stabbed, and everyone is surprisingly okay with it. There's probably some story there. We have some mutant ducks. They seem a bit scary. And this person who is really sad, all alone at night. We got Jandro. It's a new name. Very good, very good. I love the ship restaurant. That's a cool idea. First haircut. Yeah. Ooh, that's a nice moon up there. Very cool. Ooh, lots of stuff going on here. Going all the way out, filling everything. Very cool. Oh, we got a boat contest going down here with preschoolers. Got a train, Thomas the Tank Engine coming into church. Oh, it's Quidditch. Oh, it's Hogwarts. Oh, I gotcha now. Oh, that's very cool. Yeah. It's all the different years coming. Nice. Very cool. And good Hogwarts from memory. I like it. He took the prompt of sleepy. Very nice. Very cozy. Good work, Lapia. Oh. Ooh, your clouds have really improved. Like the bushes. Oh, this is very cool. Good job. Ooh, that boy with the scary skull face. And all this the cubes. Oh, that's a symbol we can't show here on the stream. Alright, very cool. If anyone wants to help promote the Discord server, we can get a few more people in maybe. I've been posting around on Reddit, but it's not a one-man job. If you're interested, let me know in the DMs. Anyways, that's all I had for today. I hope everyone had fun. I know I did. And we'll be tackling the first exercise tomorrow. And thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate it and enjoy it. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye!